In this video, we're going to take a look at how to make integration tests that test your DynamoDB connection in your code. And to demonstrate this, I have a serverless framework project in front of me. If we look at a serverless framework YAML file, we just got some permissions, a function, and a DynamoDB table defined here. And just to kind of show you the end result, if I do yarn run test int, currently in our DynamoDB table we have nothing. Once we run our tests, just to kind of prove that we actually are interacting with this table, now we have some data here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. So let's take a look at what this looks like and why we're doing it. So why are we going to test in the first place? If you have a small project, end-to-end tests might be fine. If you have a bigger project, you might want to break it up into unit and integration. And so if you look at my project here, I have a handler file and I have a database file here. And so you can imagine there's just like a bunch of business logic, and then I have a database call right in the middle, and then a bunch of business logic, and then I respond back. And so if this is a very big file, I might want to write unit tests for my business logic and then just test my connection to my database by itself without having to run this whole function here. So typically what I do is I separate things out into a database folder. Anything that's interacting with like AWS resources, whether that's SNS or DynamoDB or SES or whatever, I typically separate that away from my business logic, and then I test these things without testing the business logic, just test the database connections. And so you'll notice in this file, I have really straightforward simple functions here, just get, create, and remove. And so how are we setting this whole thing up? How did we make our database? How are we defining that we're hitting that database? Well, what I did before the video is I ran sls deploy stage test. And so that's going to make a test version of everything, including my databases, my DynamoDB databases. And so now that we have a test version in the cloud, I want to work against that specific database, which is solely for testing. And so the way I do that is in my package.json, when I'm running my test int command, I'm just setting up a environment variable here. The table is this thing. And if you go into here, it's just going to get that value right there. So we're setting up the table, and then the next question would be like, well, how is it able to connect to your AWS account? Where do you put in the credentials? Well, if you have your credentials set up in a .aws folder in your computer, it's just going to take the default. If you want to use something other than the default, you can set up a environment variable like this and just say for an AWS profile, don't use the default, use maybe personal account or work account or something like that. So with those two pieces, defining the table and defining your credentials, you're able to hit the database in the cloud. So really, really nice, really quite straightforward setup. And so if we were to run this command again, we can see that I'm setting the table, running jest, and it's just going to hit the database and confirm that it's doing everything correctly. So reason why this is nice is because if I'm running a test for this file, I want to just confirm, is the create function working correctly? Is the get function working correctly? You can just handle all that in your integration tests. So what I've done is I've set up a test command here, and it's going to be wrong. It's going to fail. So let's go ahead and run it. And it's nice that we can get validation on what's going on in a very small context here. So I can see that I was expecting to get ID of 1000, but I got item and then PK and name. So I was expecting this, but I got something very different. So then if I go into my code here, I'm just returning this, but then I forgot, oh yeah, when you're interacting with DynamoDB, it's going to give back an item. So I'm just going to return ID equals x.item.pk because I'm using PKs and SKs. And then we'll do this. And this is so much better than finding this bug while you're running your whole project with the business logic and everything else. It can be a little bit more difficult to find this. But because we're writing a test specifically for this one integration point in our code, it's quite easy to figure out. So we'll run it again. And it is passing. Wonderful. So that is just a quick video, quick demonstration of how you would set up integration tests against a real DynamoDB table.